Ever wondered what happens when you just disappear from someone's life? Not out of anger, not as a tactic, but from a place so clear, so final, it no longer requires explanation. In a world that's addicted to being seen, your absence does more than make noise. It reflects truth. To the one who once took you for granted, that truth becomes unbearable. Because silence, real silence, is not an empty space. It's a mirror. And when you no longer show up to explain, to soothe, to prove, what they're left facing is themselves. They thought you'd stay. They thought your loyalty meant forever. But now, your stillness is saying something they never expected. I no longer belong where I'm not valued. So if you've ever wondered what they truly feel once you vanish, what unfolds when their illusion of control meets the reality of your absence, this is your moment. Drop a 1 in the comments if you've ever walked away quietly. Drop a 2 if you're starting now. Either way, let this be the line you don't cross back over. And if this message already resonates with the man you're becoming, support the journey. Like this video, subscribe to Stoic Station, and start this path now with us. Because what comes next might just be the first time you realize she didn't fear losing you. She feared what your absence would reveal. Now let's begin. 1. She thought you'd stay forever. She never imagined a version of reality where you were truly gone, not just physically absent, but emotionally unreachable. In her mind, your loyalty wasn't a choice. It was a constant. It was the background music to her life. Always there, always playing, no matter how many times she walked out of the room. She grew used to your presence like one grows used to light, rarely noticed, deeply missed only when it's gone. You forgave her, often without being asked. You stayed, even when the love felt one-sided. You showed up, in small ways, in quiet ways, in ways that didn't demand recognition, but still held the relationship together. And the more consistent you were, the more she assumed you always would be. She mistook your patience for permanence, your loyalty for something unbreakable, your silence for acceptance. So when you finally walked away, without noise, without warning, without needing her to understand, it shattered something far deeper than she expected. Because she didn't think you had it in you. Not because you were weak, but because she thought her pull on your heart was stronger than your grip on your peace. And that miscalculation is what cut the deepest. It wasn't just your absence that hurt her. It was what that absence revealed. The truth that she never truly had control over you. The illusion she'd been holding on to, that no matter how she treated you, you'd still be there. Crumbled the moment you stopped orbiting around her world. You didn't just walk away, you let go. You withdrew your energy, your time, your emotional labor, and you did it not with bitterness, but with finality. And here's what she feels now, though she may never admit it. She's not grieving the loss of your love. She's grieving the loss of her power over it. Because love, real love, isn't just about presence. It's about freedom. And when you disappeared without explanation, without giving her a moment to argue or soften the blow, you did something she never expected. You reclaimed your freedom. She used to believe your loyalty was endless, that no matter how much she pulled back, you'd keep leaning in. But now she realizes that your loyalty wasn't a prison, it was a gift, one she took for granted. And the moment that gift was removed, the emotional safety she felt, the quiet comfort of knowing you were always just one message away, vanished. What stings most isn't that you're gone, it's that she knows why. She knows she pushed too far, leaned too little, and gambled on the belief that you would always choose her, even when she stopped choosing you. And now, she sees the cost of that complacency. You didn't leave in anger, you left in clarity, and clarity, to someone who built their comfort on your forgiveness, is devastating, because it's not reactionary, it's deliberate. It's final. There's nothing to argue with, nothing to negotiate, nothing left open. That's why your disappearance echoes louder than any fight ever could. Because it wasn't meant to prove a point. It was the result of finally realizing that your love doesn't have to beg to be seen, and your presence doesn't need to be tolerated to have value. You didn't vanish to punish her. You vanished because you realized she never truly saw what it cost you to stay. Now, every day that passes without your voice, without your effort, without your attention, reinforces one undeniable truth. She never truly lost you. She lost access to you. And that difference is what haunts her. Because access is power, and when you walked away, you didn't just take your heart with you. You took back the power she never should have had in the first place. 2. The loudest pain is your silence. You didn't need to raise your voice. You didn't need to fight. You didn't need to beg her to understand how deeply you were affected. You didn't give long speeches or dramatic exits. You simply stopped. Stopped explaining yourself. Stopped showing up where your presence wasn't honored. Stopped giving energy to a connection that asked you to keep proving your worth just to be seen. And in that quiet withdrawal, something far louder echoed through her world. It wasn't the kind of noise that comes from anger or confrontation. It was something else, something sharper. Because you didn't slam the door, you left it open and chose not to walk back through it. And that silence, that stillness, it said more than any words ever could. It wasn't born out of revenge. It wasn't meant to provoke or manipulate. It was clarity, clean, still, unshakable clarity. The kind that doesn't demand to be understood. The kind that doesn't wait for permission to let go. It whispered one thing: I'm done needing you to see my worth. And that's what makes it so painful for her. Because anger gives people something to push back against. When you yell, they can yell louder. When you chase, they can run. But silence, it offers no handle to grip, no argument to win, no thread to pull. It's not a pause, it's a full stop. And she didn't expect that from you. Not after everything, not after all the times you stayed, explained, forgave, compromised. You were always the one who tried to make things right, the one who calmed the storm, reached across the silence, carried the emotional weight without keeping score. So when you chose stillness over reaction, when you finally stepped out of the emotional tug-of-war, what she felt wasn't just confusion, it was loss. And not just of you, but of the version of herself that could always count on your return. Your silence took up more space than your presence ever did, because now she's not just sitting with your absence. She's sitting with every word you didn't say, every emotion you didn't explain, every goodbye you didn't give her the chance to resist. And it's in that space, where noise used to fill the gap, that she begins to realize what your presence really meant. You weren't just there. You were showing up, consistently, quietly, fully. And now that you're gone without protest, without one last message, the loudest thing she hears is everything she ignored while you were still there. Because silence doesn't need volume to make its point. Sometimes, the most devastating goodbye is the one that doesn't come with closure, but with complete and total peace. 3. She misses the way she felt with you. What lingers in her isn't just the memory of your face or the sound of your voice. It's something quieter, something deeper. She misses the way she felt in your presence, the version of herself that came alive when you were near. Because you didn't just offer love, you offered calm, you offered depth. You created a space where she didn't have to perform or pretend, where her walls could lower without fear of being judged or forgotten. You were the calm in her chaos, the still center in a life filled with distractions. Your presence didn't beg for attention, yet it anchored everything around it. You didn't try to fix her, you didn't overwhelm her, you just held the space. And in that space, she felt safe. seen, understood in a way she didn't even know she needed until it was gone. Now that you're no longer around, the world feels louder for her, but emptier too. Conversations continue, laughter echoes, but it doesn't settle the way it used to. No matter who she's with, no matter how exciting the energy or flattering the attention, something's missing. A part of her doesn't quite show up anymore, because that part only felt at home when it was with you. And this is what she's slowly realizing. What she longs for isn't just you, it's how she felt when she was with you. That lightness in her chest, that quiet in her mind, that groundedness that came not from words, but from how you simply existed beside her. You reminded her of who she could be when she was fully accepted, when she didn't have to filter herself, when love didn't feel conditional, transactional, or fragile. That kind of connection doesn't just disappear. It doesn't get replaced by the next date, the next weekend trip, the next fleeting thrill. It lingers, in the silence between text messages, in the hollow of moments that should feel full. She may try to replicate it, but deep down she knows that what you gave wasn't just attention. It was presence. It was emotional steadiness. And that's not something she can ask for from just anyone. She thought losing you would be about missing your routines, your voice, your touch. But what surprises her now is that the ache runs much deeper, because what she's actually mourning is the version of herself she could only access when you were around. The one who laughed a little freer, breathed a little easier, believed a little more. She doesn't just miss the relationship, she misses the reflection she saw in your eyes. And now, in your absence, she's learning a truth she didn't expect. That the rarest kind of loss isn't just losing someone you loved. It's losing the way you came alive when they loved you back. 4. You became the mystery she can't solve. When you were still in her life, you were predictable in the most comforting way. She knew your rhythm, how you showed up, how you responded, how you forgave. You were steady, dependable, emotionally accessible, even when she wasn't. She may not have said it, but she relied on the certainty of your presence. You were the chapter in her story she thought she could always return to, the page she could leave open without ever worrying it would be turned without her. But now, you've gone quiet. No texts, no calls, no story updates, no passive likes, no trace of where you are or how you're doing. And in a world where everyone is constantly broadcasting even their most meaningless thoughts, your absence feels louder than ever. It's not just that you've stopped talking, it's that you've stopped showing. No digital breadcrumbs, no emotional leakage, just stillness, a complete void where there used to be something constant. And that stillness, it unnerves her, because it's not just space, it's uncertainty. She doesn't know what to make of it, not because you're sending mixed signals, but because you've stopped sending any signals at all. She can't read you anymore. She used to feel one step ahead of your emotions, able to anticipate when you'd reach out again, when your silence was temporary, when your heart would soften and come back around. But not this time. You've become a question she can't answer, a presence she can no longer track. You're a blank page in a book she thought she had finished writing, one where she assumed she knew how the story ended. But suddenly, you're no longer part of the narrative she controls. And what she's beginning to realize is that your disappearance wasn't a reaction. It was a decision. It wasn't dramatic. It was definitive. What unsettles her most is that you're not doing anything. You're not trying to get a reaction. You're not watching from afar. You're not waiting for her to notice. And that confuses her in a way anger never could. Because for the first time, she's not sure if you're still holding on, or if you've truly let go. The man she once understood has evolved into someone unfamiliar, quiet, contained, sovereign. And that evolution haunts her not because it's loud, but because it's untouchable. She can't trace your thoughts. She can't follow your moves. And the more you stay silent, the more her imagination fills the gaps, with possibilities, with doubts, with fear. You're no longer the man who was always available. You're the man who vanished without explanation and left behind a silence so exact, so intentional that it doesn't just hurt, it haunts. Because in that silence she hears the clearest message of all. You've stopped orbiting around her, and now she has no idea what world you belong to. 5. Your silence made her face herself. When you were there, she never had to confront the full weight of her actions. You absorbed her moods, softened her sharp edges, and filled in the emotional blanks she refused to acknowledge. You held space for both of you, patiently, quietly, hoping that one day she'd see the imbalance for what it was. But when you finally walked away without anger, without drama, and most of all, without explanation, you left her alone with the one thing she had always avoided, herself. And now, there's no distraction to deflect the truth. There's no one left to absorb the weight of her silence. No one to validate her rationalizations. No one to carry what she refused to hold. The mirror she avoided for so long is now impossible to look away from. And in that mirror, the truth stares back with brutal clarity. Every message she ignored, every moment she brushed off your presence as something guaranteed, every time she mistook your emotional consistency for something she could take without ever needing to give back. You didn't leave to teach her a lesson. You didn't disappear to create regret. You left because you finally understood that your patience had crossed into something quieter, more dangerous, self-betrayal. And that realization didn't require a goodbye speech. It only required one decision: to stop explaining your worth to someone who only understood it in hindsight. Now, without your presence to lean on or push against, she's left with everything she once dismissed. And for the first time, she's beginning to understand the difference between losing a relationship and losing someone who once held her world together without ever asking to be noticed. 6. She tries to reconnect, but you're no longer there. At first, she says nothing. Maybe she even convinces herself it's better this way, clean, distant, final, but silence has a way of stretching into spaces she never expected. What began as confidence starts to shift into curiosity, then into wondering, and slowly into regret. That's when it happens. The subtle signs. A like on a photo you forgot was even there. A vague message without substance, sent late at night. A check-in disguised as casual. She's not ready to say what she really feels, and maybe she doesn't fully understand it herself. But something inside her is hoping you'll still be within reach, that you'll respond like you used to. Ready, warm, open. But you don't, because you're not standing where she left you. You're not waiting. You're not aching in silence, hoping she'll return. You've grown quietly and consistently in places she can no longer access. You've rebuilt not only your life, but your sense of self. The version of you she once walked away from no longer exists. He served his purpose. He carried the lessons, and now he's gone. She doesn't know how to find the man you've become because she's looking in the wrong place, reaching backward when you've already moved forward. She's trying to reconnect with a memory. But memory can't hold what growth has replaced. And the man she once knew, he's no longer available, not out of cruelty, but because you've evolved beyond who you had to be to love her. 7th, her freedom feels hollow. At first, she told herself this was what she needed: space, distance, a break from the emotional weight she never fully acknowledged. In the beginning, it felt like freedom, light, unburdened, full of possibility. She moved through conversations with ease, explored new attention, embraced the idea of starting fresh. But what she didn't realize was that there's a difference between freedom and disconnection. between space that heals and space that echoes. The people she meets now might be fun, even interesting, but none of them reach the parts of her you once held so effortlessly. The way you listened without trying to fix her, the way you stayed present without demanding more. Your quiet strength didn't fight for attention, it simply made her feel safe, seen, understood. And now, that stillness you once brought is gone, and the world feels louder, but emptier too. It's in the silence between texts, in the small talk that never lands, that she begins to feel it, the hollow space you used to fill. She told herself she was free, but slowly, freedom starts to feel like drifting, like wandering through moments that sparkle on the surface but leave her feeling nothing underneath. And eventually the truth becomes unavoidable. What she called freedom was never peace. It was distraction, temporary, surface level, because what she walked away from wasn't weight, it was depth. And now, that so-called freedom has turned cold, because freedom without meaning is just a prettier kind of loneliness, and nothing reminds her of that more than your absence. 8. When she can't move you, she performs. When your silence lingers longer than she expected, when her absence doesn't seem to pull you back in, something shifts in her approach. She doesn't reach out directly, not at first. Instead, she turns to performance. The smiles on her photos get brighter, the captions more carefully worded, the quotes more subtly targeted. Every post becomes a signal dressed as self-expression, curated not for her healing, but for your attention. It's not that she's moved on, it's that she doesn't know how to handle not being able to move you. She's used to evoking reactions. She knew how to trigger your care, your concern, your desire to fix what was broken. But now, the man who once responded to every emotional breadcrumb doesn't even glance. And that unnerves her more than any argument ever could. Because what she's starting to understand, quietly, maybe even painfully, is that you're no longer watching, you're no longer waiting for signs. You've stepped off the emotional stage, and you're not looking back at the performance she's giving. She's not healing, she's hoping that her carefully timed presence in your periphery will stir something in you again. But it doesn't. Not because you don't feel, but because you've grown. You've stopped playing the game, and a game only works if you're still willing to play. The real tragedy for her isn't that she lost your attention. It's that your silence means she no longer has the power to control it. 9. The real fear. You're never coming back. What unsettles her the most isn't your silence. It isn't the unanswered messages or the distance you've created. It's the quiet possibility that you're not coming back. Not out of pride, not out of anger, but because you've truly outgrown the version of yourself who once waited for her to understand what she had. In the past, even when things were strained, she could still feel your energy lingering, hoping, watching, open to repair. But now, there's nothing. No reaction, no tension, no pull. And that absence carries a weight she can't escape. Because this time, it doesn't feel like you're waiting for her to return. It feels like you've left the space entirely. She doesn't fear losing your attention. She fears losing your attachment. She fears that you no longer check her page, no longer think of what could have been, no longer hold space in your life for something that's already been broken too long. The fear isn't that she hurt you. The fear is that you've healed, and that healing has placed you somewhere she can no longer reach. The man who once stayed through confusion, through emotional chaos, through every excuse and delay, is no longer accessible, and that's what shakes her deepest. Because it's not rejection, it's resolution. It's not resentment, it's peace. And when a man finds peace without the person who once defined his chaos, there's no door left open, no unfinished ending, no waiting room in his heart. Just quiet, just freedom. And that freedom, the kind that no longer needs her, is what she never saw coming. 10. The realization of emotional independence. There comes a turning point, not marked by loud declarations or dramatic goodbyes, but by a quiet, internal shift. It's the moment you stop looking backward, the moment you stop checking your phone, the moment you stop hoping they'll understand what they lost. It's subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but then it grows. What once felt like a wound begins to feel like an awakening. You didn't disappear to hurt them. You didn't fall silent to manipulate. You stepped away because something within you whispered that it was time to return to yourself, and in that space, free from their opinions, their validation, their ever-shifting affection, you began to hear your own voice again. For the first time in a long time, you remembered what it felt like to simply be, without performance, without chasing, without waiting for someone to finally treat you as you deserved. You realized you no longer needed their closure to find your peace. You didn't need to be chosen in order to feel worthy. Their absence stopped feeling like a loss and started feeling like liberation. You stopped orbiting around their moods, their silence, their games, and instead you began to build something sacred, a life rooted in truth, in solitude, in quiet strength. Emotional independence isn't cold. It's not distant or detached. It's calm. It's whole. It's the gentle knowing that your happiness is no longer negotiable, that your worth cannot be measured by someone else's ability to see it. You're not avoiding pain. You've processed it. You're not closed off. You're finally open, but only to what aligns with who you truly are. While they remain caught in a loop of curiosity, regret and control, you've stepped into a new story, one where you are no longer the supporting role in their drama, but the author of your own piece. That shift, that quiet reclamation of self, is something they never saw coming. You didn't just move on, you moved inward. And in doing so, you became everything they never thought you'd become. Complete without them. If you've made it this far, then you already know. This isn't about her anymore. It's about you, about how long you tolerated being misunderstood, taken for granted, or emotionally overlooked, all while giving your best in silence. What I want you to understand now is this. When a man finally walks away without noise, without needing to be seen, he's not punishing anyone. He's choosing himself. And that choice, though quiet, carries more power than any emotional outburst ever could. This journey you've walked through, the clarity, the silence, the detachment, the growth, it wasn't to prove your worth. It was to remember it. The lesson here is simple but powerful. Your love is not a debt to be collected, and your presence is not a given. When you stop chasing, when you stop explaining, when you stop accepting less than you deserve, you become untouchable, not because you're cold, but because you're finally whole. Let that truth settle. The man who no longer fears being forgotten is the one who becomes unforgettable. You didn't disappear to teach her a lesson. You disappeared because you finally learned your own, and that's where your real strength begins. If something in this message stirred something real in you, if it reminded you of the strength you carry, the peace you deserve, or the quiet power of walking away with dignity, then I invite you to stay on this path with us. Becoming a channel member helps us keep creating the kind of content that speaks to men who are rising quietly, reclaiming their power, and refusing to settle for anything less than truth. But even if that's not the step for you right now, just subscribing to Stoic Station or simply liking this video goes further than you know. Every small gesture of support helps bring this message to those who need it most. Wherever you are on your journey, let this truth stay with you. You are not waiting to be seen. You are not begging to be understood. You've remembered who you are, And that is enough. You've stopped chasing, and you've started becoming. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, walk steady, choose peace, and keep building the kind of strength no one sees coming.